Hi SSC101, welcome to your Chapter 12 assignment video. So Chapter 12 talks about the title, Taking Control of Your Future, but it focuses a lot on kind of the career decision-making process. So it really starts from kind of step one, if you will, like what do you like? What are your interests? And then guide you through a little bit further, all the way to, okay, it's time to write some resumes and your cover letters. So I know a lot of you in here are at very different places in your professional life. Some of you are CCP students, and so you're not even in college officially yet. And some of you are back into college after a career already, or some of you are kind of in between. So I say that because just whatever works for you. Pay attention to the sections that kind of apply to you, especially after this video is done. Go back into the chapter, click around, and spend more time on those particular areas that make the most sense for you to spend your energy on. All right, so like most chapters, we start off with just kind of like a real quick check-in. Where are you now in terms of your understanding of this topic? So your career options, your resumes, networking. Also, in terms of goal setting, what are things you want to do in this chapter as it relates to career development, employment, resumes, cover letters, majors? And then this is the objectives of the chapter. So we're going to jump in, and the very basic beginning of this is just saying, hey, the job market has changed. And what I like to point out is this online text was written several years ago. And so even from the publication of this online text, the job market has changed dramatically since then because of COVID. COVID has really changed the landscape of, most fields. I think every field has felt its impact in some way, even though we are several years out of being in the thick of COVID. So this is even more true, that you need to make sure that you understand kind of what the landscape of your particular field looks like. And so I'm going to show you in a few minutes some websites where you can start to get a feel for that if you don't already know. So what do you do? Again, starting from the beginning, how do you pick your major, or how do you know what field you want to go into? So just really understanding your goals is the place to start with. What are your dreams? And I know it sounds a little like cliche, like what do you want to be when you grow up? Like depending on if you're 20, 30, 40, it doesn't matter. What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? What goals do you have? And so not only knowing those goals, but why they're important to you, why you hold the goals that you do. You know, you want to be a nurse, but why? Like, what is it about the field of nursing that kind of draws you into it? If you want to go into IT, why? What is, really compelling you, feeling like you are being pulled into that area? So just really thinking about why it is that you want to go into there. From there, we talk about career exploration, a little bit of the difference between a job and a career. So a job, you can like your job for sure, but usually a job is just kind of like you need a job to pay your bills. It might not be something that you are going to be in long term, and you might not necessarily have trained for your job. Versus a career is something that hopefully you have a passion for, you have a long-term goal associated with it, and it's something that brings you just a lot of joy or satisfaction in multiple different ways, not just financially, but all the other ways that are important as well. So thinking about what you want to do and then exploring it if you don't know what you want to do. So this section is really talking to those of you who you haven't declared a major or you're thinking about changing your major. So and it's also for those of you who know what you want to do, maybe just checking back in why you chose the major, or does it align with your values and your characteristics? So choosing a major, things you want to think about is, who are you? What kind of qualities do you have? What's your personality? And often when we talk about personalities in academia, Holland is brought up, Holland's personalities. And there are 6 types of personalities according to John Holland. Here they are right here. So I encourage you to kind of look through, and you're going to have an assignment where actually you take an assessment and the results will tell you what kind of personality you have. But I still think it's interesting to kind of read through these 6 to see where do you see yourself. And depending on your personality, there are certain fields that are better for you to go into. For instance, if you're a social person, these people like to go into fields where you're interacting with people. So nursing, education, things that you're going to have that strong connection to the public. Whereas maybe if you're more enterprising, you're risk taking. So maybe like an entrepreneur, you are taking the lead and you're confident in things. So just really, it depends on that connection. What is nice is there will be down here, so like what's out there, right here, connects our personalities to some sample occupations. So if you're realistic, here are some fields that you might want to go into. The point of this section basically is saying that career satisfaction is more attainable when your personality and the field you go into mesh nicely together. For instance, one semester I had a student who said she's antisocial, she doesn't like people, but then ironically she was going into nursing. There wasn't just quite a match there, right? That's a weird mix up. If you don't like people, you probably shouldn't be in a helping field. So you want to find something that's going to click with you so that you do have the best chance of having that career satisfaction as well as personal satisfaction overall. Some things that might impact your choice other than your goals, your dreams, your personality, because we have to be realistic. Other things do impact why we choose what we do. So timing, maybe you want to go into the medical field, become like an RN or a doctor of some sort, but it's so much time. It's so much schooling. Can you afford to invest the time, the money, the energy leading to your finances? Do you have to relocate for it? Do you already have a family, or maybe you don't? Like, all of those things are factors that play into it. And then also thinking about what your life is going to look like after you're done with schooling. Like, how are you going to find a job? What jobs are out there? Is your field growing? So really just understanding a lot about the background of your field. And so to help you understand that, just a couple websites, and I know we've talked about a few of these before, but the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is a great place to go. And I think I use physical therapy as an example. You search up here for your field, and then you find the best match. And when you get there, it has a nice little overview and then tabs that give you more information. And the job outlook is a helpful one that says, like, hey, if your field is growing or not so much. So for instance, when I first got my degree in education a long time ago, Ohio was not hiring teachers. They just weren't. There was a overabundance of teachers. But places like Las Vegas and the North and South Carolinas, they were hiring. And so I had very little to lose. So I was 22. I decided I'm going to move. I had no children. I wasn't married yet. So I moved down to North Carolina. But I was willing to do that because I had kind of that availability. But I also knew ahead of time heading into college that teaching was a field that I probably wasn't going to get hired in right away if I wanted to stay in Ohio. So that's really important to know. Like, are you willing to locate? Can you not relocate? And that's not to say that if your field is not growing that you can't get a job. It just might have a little bit more competition related to it. So it's helpful to know early on to get into it, just what you're going to be looking at when you're done with graduation. Also knowing how much you're going to get paid, especially if you have student loans taken out. How much are you going to get paid? So because you have to start paying those loans back 6 months after graduation. And oftentimes the payments start fairly high. So what's the pay rate going to be like? So this is a really helpful site. You can also go to ONET Online. This is another one. This one is a little bit more overwhelming, I will say, just because it has a lot of information in a very list format, which is great, but sometimes I think this one's a little bit more user-friendly. But you can still check this one out. It talks just all the details about what you need in these particular fields, and you can collapse and expand as needed. Go through all of this. So really digging in, another place you can go is, if we drop down here, I'm going to go into Career Coach, and you can search for your career. Just going to stick with physical therapy assistant. You can find the one that matches, and not only will it give you some nice career details, it's also going to give you the program that's associated with it here at the college, if there is one. And so this is another very user-friendly way to kind of find out information and look at employment. What's the projection? Is it going up? That's really helpful to look at. All right, so after you've kind of done the background information, then you can go ahead and start choosing your major. So what do you do? How do you choose your major? It's important to know about your major, not just your career, your major. So going under academics and going into your program. So really paying attention to the kinds of classes you're going to have to take. How many credit hours is your program? Do you have a licensure exam? I'm just going to click on these. Do you have a licensure exam when you finish the program? Do you have to take a test to get into the program? So all of those are really helpful to know. And this is kind of pulling up some basic information about degree plans here. So making sure that you have the electives, the requirements, knowing all of that, that's where your advisor comes in. Okay? Some other things you want to think about is, again, keeping your goals in mind, but also make sure that you are adding that fun in. What is going to be a fun field to you to be in? Talk to people who have been in the field to get an idea of what it might be like. Be open to change. I know it's kind of daunting to think about you might have to change your major, but it's really actually common for college students to change your major. Sometimes students will change their major 3 to 4 times. So be flexible and know that maybe when you start taking classes, you figure out, this is not for me. It's better to change it earlier than later. And it's not a bad thing because you don't want to spend your entire college career in a field that you're not happy with. All right, moving on from there. Some of you in here are going to go to a 4-year after you leave here. So just checking in with your advisor now to find out how that transfer process will look. What can you do now to make sure everything will be smooth? If you want to go to Kent or Akron or Ohio State or wherever it might be, how can you make sure that's easy for you? What classes will or will not transfer? We also want to talk about and think about our transferable skills, sometimes called soft skills or non-technical skills. They're called transferable because just like it implies, they can be transferred to any field. So think about, skills like active listening, communication, teamwork, time management. Those are all skills that it doesn't matter if you are in the healthcare, or if you're in information technology, if you're in business, those are all important. Your technical skills will get you a job, but it's these skills right here that are going to help you keep a job as well as maybe advance, because oftentimes employers will say, yeah, not anyone, but they can hire 5 IT, but if there's a person who knows their field but can also do all of these things, they're going to be an asset. So just kind of informally thinking about what soft skills or transferable skills you have, how are they helpful, and then what do you need to work on? What skills should you be brushing up on because it'll be helpful to you when you get into your field. All right, whenever you are kind of just still in your college phase, how can you kind of dip your toe in the water? And there's lots of different ways to do that. You could definitely volunteer. There's lots of ways to volunteer in different fields. You could look for an internship if that's practical for you. Sometimes they're built in. There are some fields, think about education, like student teaching or observation, or there's some clinicals and nursing, things like that. So they kind of build in a program like that, but maybe interning or just getting a part-time job or job shadowing someone for a day or two. All of those are options, but they really do help you kind of just get an understanding for what the field might be like on a day-to-day basis. All right, continuing to move on. Again, thinking about your career development, even though some of you are in your first or second semester, it's not too early to start thinking about how can I build my resume? How can I really develop myself as a professional, even though I am in these early stages? And so looking at resources, talking to your advisor, starting to really think about the path that you're on are all important pieces of that career development. I mentioned the word networking. Networking is, I'm sure you've maybe heard the phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I mean, both are important, but sometimes who you know will get you in the door a little bit quicker than on your own. So networking, and that can start here at the college with your advisor. It can start by you joining a club on campus. It can start by you reaching out to a potential employer and asking to job shadow. There's lots of ways to network. You can also network online, and social networking is not necessarily like, TikTok and Facebook, but you can, depending on the field. Like if you're a photography major, you probably should be using Instagram or things like that to try to show off your portfolio. But if you're in other fields, you might steer closer to like LinkedIn and those type of professional places to network. But talking to your advisor is a good place as well to start, to really make sure that you are starting to get connected to people. There are also job fairs that the college puts on and surrounding areas put on. You could go to those and start slowly networking. Little conferences. They even have symposiums here at the college that you could start presenting or attending to start networking and meeting people that are in your field from other places. So really just paying attention to who you can know to help you kind of just get a little bit of ahead. So this whole section talks about the power of networking, making sure that you are, taking risks. Sometimes it is scary to like call someone or go to a job fair and meet someone, but it's going to save you in the long run if you can make that connection and then kind of keep building on that connection. Finally, we start wrapping up by talking about resumes and cover letters. So some of you might already be getting to this part. It's never too early to get your resume ready, because one thing that students will sometimes say is, you know, if they waited too long and then they have to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, I did this 5 years ago. What do I remember? How do I put this down? So even an informal resume on, you know, just start a document, start kind of keeping track of the things that you do. There's lots of different types of resumes and there's different kinds of cover letters. So knowing the type of resume, the format, what's expected, if you need a cover letter, if you don't need a cover letter, all of that is part of the process. And so this section goes through talking about like verbiage, which I will say, if you go to places like BLS or the Career Coach, which I know is one of these tabs, but if you look at job postings, you can look and see the type of language that they use in job postings now and start putting that language into your resume so that you're kind of mirroring that. Making sure other people look at your resume is important as well. Getting feedback, allowing other people to kind of look at your cover letter, all of that plays an essential part. And then the part that a lot of people are not very excited is interviewing. You know, the resume gets you in the door, but then the interview will seal the deal. And so knowing the type of interview, because it goes through these different types, you know, informational, screening, one-on-one, if there's a group interview, sometimes they're very intimidating, especially if you have to present or teach or, you know, have a whole forum of people that you have to answer questions to. So making sure you know the type of interview, preparing for the interview, making sure that you have researched the organization, you go in with information and also prepared to ask questions yourself, because you should also be interviewing them. Yes, they're asking you questions, but you are also seeing if they're a good fit for you. So making sure that you're prepared heading into that interview. And there's like a little study guide about interviewing right there as well, so that you are as prepared as possible as you head into there. Talking about your attire, some general tips for success. You know, I haven't had to interview for a while, but I can tell you that I know that I would get nervous if I had to go to an interview right now. So just kind of reminding yourself that, hey, take a deep breath, maybe don't make too serious, but very conversational. So lots of tips there, and then what to do to follow up after an interview. So this is the basis of chapter 12. I do want to point out our resource that's very connected is career services. So at the very bottom under quick links, there is how I like to get that. This is a great resource on campus. I say that no matter who you are on this campus, your goal is to get a career when you're done, whether you're CCP or you're finishing here. You want a career somewhere, and they can help you no matter if you already graduated, already transferred, if you were CCP. They have lots of help here. You can go ahead and get internship information, practice interview. We have something called a big interview that allows you to record yourself and watch yourself back so you know how you would do in an interview situation. It gives you practice questions. There's resume tips. There's different surveys you can look at past students and what they're doing now. And then you can make appointments online, in person. There's contact information. Here's the calendar of events. This changes every semester, but really utilize them. It's already built into your tuition. They're a great resource on campus, and it connects very nicely to this chapter. All right, that is it. Like I said, I encourage you to spend time in the section that really applies most to you, and I will see you next time.